Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
What if the reason you haven't reached twin flame union yet is because you still want it? Not because you're doing something wrong. Not because you're not ready. But because the wanting itself is what's keeping it away. Let me ask you something. Why does everything feel calmer the moment you stop chasing? Why do they seem to come closer right when you stop focusing on them? And why is it that the more you try to make union happen, the further it feels? Is it really about timing? Or is it about energy? Because think about this. There was a time when you wanted them so badly. You analyzed everything. You waited. You hoped something would finally change. And now, you're letting go. You're focusing on yourself. You're becoming okay even without them. So what changed? Did you give up on the connection? Or did you finally release the only thing that was blocking it? Because here's the truth most people don't realize. Twin flame union doesn't happen when you want it the most. It happens when you no longer need it at all. Chapter 1. The illusion of wanting, why it feels like progress but isn't. At the beginning of this journey, wanting feels like the most natural thing in the world. You feel something intense. You recognize a connection that goes beyond logic. You experience emotions that you cannot explain. And because of that, your instinct is simple. You want it. You want clarity. You want closeness. You want the connection to move forward. You want union. And at first, that desire feels like movement. It feels like you are doing something. Like you are actively participating in the journey. Like your emotions, your thoughts, your focus are somehow bringing you closer. But here is where the truth begins to shift everything. Wanting does not move you forward. It holds you in place. Not because desire is wrong, but because of what desire creates beneath the surface. Think about what wanting actually is. Wanting implies that something is not here. That something is missing. That something exists outside of your current experience. And that subtle belief shapes your entire energy. Even if you don't say it out loud. Even if you don't consciously think it. Your energy is communicating one thing. I don't have it yet. And that matters more than anything you say, think, or do. Because the twin flame journey is not driven by action. It is driven by energy. And energy does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are. This is why wanting creates an illusion. Because on the surface, it feels active. It feels like you are moving toward something. But energetically, it places you in a state of lack. A state where you are constantly aware of what is not here. And that awareness creates distance. Not physically, but energetically. You begin to focus on the absence. You notice the silence. You interpret every delay as something that needs to be resolved. And without realizing it, you start to chase. Not always through action, but through attention, through thought, through emotional investment. You think about them constantly. You replay conversations. You analyze signs. You try to understand what everything means. And all of that creates movement. But it is not forward movement. It is circular. You are not moving closer. You are moving around the same point. The point of wanting. And as long as you are in that state, you remain in the same energetic position. Because wanting is not alignment. It is attachment. Attachment to an outcome. Attachment to a future that has not yet happened. Attachment to the idea that something needs to change in order for you to feel complete. And this attachment creates pressure. Even if you don't express it outwardly. It exists internally. It shapes your energy. It influences the connection. Because the other person does not respond to your words. They respond to your energy. An energy that comes from wanting carries weight. It carries expectation. It carries a subtle demand that something should happen. And that demand creates resistance. Not because the connection is not real, but because the energy is not balanced. One side is reaching. The other side feels that reach. And instinctively it pulls away. This is the dynamic that defines the earlier stages. The more you want, the more you reach. The more you reach, the more the other side creates distance. And the more distance there is, the stronger the wanting becomes. And so the cycle continues. Not because something is wrong, but because the energy has not yet stabilized. And this is where the illusion becomes clear. Because wanting feels like love. It feels like care. It feels like connection. But beneath it, there is dependency. A belief that something outside of you is needed in order for you to feel whole. And as long as that belief exists, you remain in a state of seeking. A state where you are always looking for something to complete the experience. But union cannot happen in that state. Because union is not built on seeking. It is built on alignment. And alignment is not something you create through effort. It is something that emerges when wanting dissolves. Because when wanting disappears, the sense of lack disappears with it. You are no longer focused on what is missing. You are no longer projecting your attention into the future. You are present, fully, and presence changes everything. Because when you are present, you are not trying to get anything. You are not trying to make something happen. You are not trying to control the outcome. You are simply experiencing your life as it is. And that state is stable. It does not create pressure. It does not create resistance. It does not push the connection in any direction. It allows it to exist. Naturally. And this is the shift that changes everything. Not when you want more, but when you need less. Because needing less removes the tension. It removes the expectation. It removes the subtle energy that says something has to change. And when that energy is gone, the connection is no longer reacting. It is no longer being influenced by imbalance. It is simply there. And from that place, everything begins to align. So if you find yourself wanting clarity, wanting movement, wanting union, do not judge it. Do not try to force it away. But recognize it. See it for what it is. Not progress, but a signal. A signal that your energy is still focused on what is not here. And the moment you see that, the moment you become aware of it, you create space. Space to shift. Space to return your attention to yourself. Space to move from wanting to being. Because the truth is simple. Union does not come closer when you want it more. It comes closer when you no longer need it to happen. And that shift does not begin with action. It begins with awareness, with seeing clearly. That wanting is not the path forward. It is the place you are meant to grow beyond. And once you do, everything changes. Not because you made it happen, but because you stopped holding it back. And that is where the journey truly begins. Not in wanting, but in letting go of it. Chapter 2. Why wanting creates resistance, the energy you don't see. At first, it seems harmless. Wanting connection. Wanting closeness. Wanting things to move forward. It feels like love. It feels like care. It feels like you are invested in something meaningful. So how could something that feels so natural actually create resistance? This is where the deeper layer of the journey begins to reveal itself. Because wanting is not just a feeling. It is an energetic position. And that position carries a message. Not the message you think you are sending, but the one you are actually embodying. I don't have it. That is what wanting communicates. Even if your mind is focused on love, on connection, on hope, your energy is anchored in the absence of what you want. And that subtle difference changes everything. Because energy does not respond to your intentions. It responds to your state. If your state is, I don't have it yet, then everything you experience will continue to reflect that. Not as punishment. Not as delay. But as alignment. This is why wanting creates resistance. Because it keeps you anchored in a state where the thing you desire is always somewhere else. Somewhere ahead of you. Somewhere you have not reached yet. And as long as that is your state, you remain separate from it. Not physically, but energetically. You create a gap. A distance between where you are and where you believe you need to be. And that gap is what defines the experience of separation. Think about it. When you are in a state of wanting, your attention is not here. It is directed outward, toward the connection, toward the other person, toward a future that has not yet happened. You are constantly referencing something outside of your present experience. And that creates movement. But it is not grounded movement. It is projection. Your energy is moving away from you towards something that you believe will complete you. And that movement creates instability. Because you are no longer centered. You are no longer grounded in your own experience. You are reaching. And reaching creates tension. It creates pressure. Even if you are not acting on it externally. Even if you are not sending messages or expressing your feelings. The energy is still there. It exists in your thoughts. In your focus. In the way your attention constantly returns to the connection. And that energy is felt. Not through logic. But through resonance. The other person may not consciously understand it. But they feel it. Because energy communicates beyond words. And when your energy is reaching, it creates an imbalance. One side is extending. The other side responds by creating space. Not as a rejection, but as a natural reaction to pressure. Because pressure always creates distance. It pushes things apart. Not because something is wrong, but because balance has not yet been established. And this is the cycle that so many people experience. The more you want, the more you focus. The more you focus, the more your energy reaches outward. The more your energy reaches, the more the connection responds by creating distance. And the more distance there is, the stronger the wanting becomes. Because now, not only do you want the connection, you feel the absence of it more deeply. And so the cycle repeats, over and over. Not because the connection is not meant to come together, but because the energy is not yet aligned. Because alignment does not exist in a state of wanting. It exists in a state of being. And being is the opposite of wanting. Wanting is future-oriented. It is focused on what is not yet here. Being is present. It is grounded in what already exists. And this is where the shift begins. Not by forcing yourself to stop wanting, but by becoming aware of what wanting is actually doing. By seeing that it is not bringing you closer. It is keeping you in the same place. Because as long as you are in a state of wanting, you are reinforcing the idea that something is missing. And that idea becomes your reality. But the moment you shift out of that state, the moment you stop referencing what is not here, everything changes. You return to yourself. You bring your attention back. To your life. To your experience. To what is actually present. And in that return, the tension dissolves. Because you are no longer reaching. You are no longer projecting your energy outward. You are centered. And when you are centered, there is no pressure. There is no imbalance. There is no resistance. There is only presence. And presence does not push anything away. It does not create distance. It allows things to exist. Naturally. Without interference. And this is why the moment you stop wanting, everything begins to shift. Not because you did something externally, but because you changed your internal state. You are no longer anchored in lack. You are no longer focused on absence. You are no longer creating the gap. And without that gap, there is nothing keeping the connection apart. This is the paradox. The more you want something, the further it feels. The moment you no longer need it, it begins to come closer. Not because you manipulated the outcome, but because you removed the resistance. You stopped creating the condition that was keeping it away. And this is where the deeper truth becomes clear. Union is not about getting something. It is about removing what is in the way. And what is in the way is not the other person. It is not timing. It is not circumstances. It is the state of wanting. The state of believing that something is not here yet. Because as long as that belief exists, you will continue to experience that reality. but the moment that belief dissolves. The moment you no longer feel like something is missing. You step into alignment. And alignment is what allows everything to come together. So if you find yourself wanting, if you feel the pull to check, to think, to analyze, to wait, do not resist it. Do not judge it, but recognize it. See it clearly, as a state, not as truth. And in that awareness, you create the possibility for something new. A shift. From wanting to being. From reaching to allowing. From lack to presence. And that shift is what changes everything. Not because you forced it, but because you finally saw what was there all along. That the only thing standing between you and union was not distance, but resistance. And the moment that resistance dissolves, there is nothing left to keep it away. Chapter 3. The hidden chase, why thinking about them is still chasing. There is a form of chasing that most people never recognize. It does not look like action. It does not involve messages, calls, or visible effort. And because of that, it feels harmless. You tell yourself, I'm not chasing. I'm not reaching out. I'm just thinking about them. I'm just trying to understand the connection. But this is where the deeper truth begins to reveal itself. Chasing is not something you do. It is something you are. It is a state of energy. And that state is defined by where your attention lives. If your attention is constantly returning to them, you are still chasing. Not physically, but energetically. And energy is what defines the connection. Think about how your mind behaves in the earlier stages. You wake up and they are your first thought. You go through your day and something reminds you of them. You replay conversations. You analyze what they said, what they didn't say, what it could mean. You imagine future scenarios. You try to understand what is happening between you. And all of this feels natural. It feels like part of the connection. It feels like you are simply processing something meaningful. But beneath all of that there is a pattern. Your attention is not with you. It is with them. And wherever your attention goes, your energy follows. This is what creates the hidden chase. Because even if you are not acting externally, you are still moving internally. You are reaching. You are investing your energy into something outside of your present experience. And that movement creates imbalance. Because you are no longer centered. You are extended. Part of you is here, living your life. And part of you is somewhere else, thinking, analyzing, imagining. And that division creates instability. Because you are not fully present in your own energy. You are split. And this split is what keeps the cycle alive. Because as long as your attention is focused on them, you remain in a state of seeking. You are looking for something. Understanding, clarity, confirmation. And that seeking creates the same energetic pattern as wanting. Even if it feels different. Because the root is the same. A belief that something outside of you holds the answer. That something external needs to be understood in order for you to feel at peace. And that belief keeps your attention moving outward. But here is the truth that changes everything. The moment your attention leaves you, you leave your center. And the moment you leave your center, you create imbalance. And imbalance is what keeps the connection from stabilizing. Because union does not happen when one person is constantly focused on the other. It happens when both individuals are fully present within themselves. And that requires your attention to return to you. Not partially, but fully. This is why thinking about them constantly is not neutral. It is not just a passive experience. It is an energetic movement. A subtle form of chasing that keeps your energy extended outward. And that extension creates pressure, even if you are not aware of it. Because your energy is not grounded. It is reaching. And that reaching is felt. Not consciously, but energetically. The other person does not need to know what you are thinking. They do not need to hear your words. They feel the pull. And instinctively, they respond by creating space. Not because they don't care, but because the energy is not balanced. And balance is what allows connection to exist. Without balance, there is always movement. Push and pull. Reach and retreat. And this is the cycle that continues until something changes. Not externally, but internally. Until your attention returns to you. Until you are no longer constantly thinking about them. Until your mind is no longer occupied with the connection. Until your energy is no longer extended outward. And this is where the shift becomes real. Because when your attention returns, everything changes. You are no longer split. You are whole. You are no longer reaching. You are grounded. You are no longer seeking. You are present. And presence is what creates stability. Not effort. Not action. But the simple act of being fully here. In your own experience. In your own life. Without needing to constantly reference something outside of you. And this is where the paradox begins to unfold. The moment you stop thinking about them constantly is the moment the connection becomes stronger. Not because you did something, but because you stopped creating the imbalance. You stopped feeding the cycle. You allowed your energy to settle. And when your energy settles, the connection has space. Space to exist without pressure. Space to evolve without interference. Space to move naturally. And this is what most people struggle with. Because they believe that thinking about the connection keeps it alive. That focusing on it maintains it. That analyzing it helps it move forward. But the truth is the opposite. The more you focus on it, the more you interfere with its natural flow. Because your attention carries expectation. It carries meaning. It carries a subtle desire for something to happen. And that creates resistance. But when your attention returns to you, there is no expectation, no pressure, no need for something to happen. And in that absence, the connection is free. Free to move. Free to align. Free to come together. Without being influenced by your thoughts. And this is the shift that changes everything. Not when you stop caring. Not when you push the connection away. But when you stop chasing it internally. When your mind is no longer occupied by it. When your attention is no longer centered on it. When you are fully here. In your own life. In your own experience. And from that place, everything begins to change. Because you are no longer creating the conditions that keep the connection unstable. You are allowing it to become stable. Naturally. Effortlessly. Without force. So if you find yourself constantly thinking about them, analyzing the connection, trying to understand what everything means, do not judge it, but recognize it. See it clearly. As movement. As energy. As a form of chasing. And in that awareness, you create the possibility to shift. To bring your attention back. To return to yourself. To become whole again. And that is where everything begins. Not in what you do, but in where your attention rests. Because wherever your attention is, that is where your energy lives. And when your energy is with you, everything else can finally align. Chapter 4. Why the runner pulls away. It's not what you think. There is a moment in this journey where everything feels confusing. You feel the connection strongly. You know it is real. You feel drawn toward them in a way you cannot explain. And then they pull away. Not gradually. Not in a way that makes sense. But suddenly, almost instinctively. And this is where the mind begins to search for answers. Did I do something wrong? Did I say too much? Why do they run when the connection feels so strong? It feels contradictory. Because if something is real, if something is meaningful, why would someone move away from it? This is where most people misunderstand the dynamic. Because they interpret the runner's behavior as rejection, as disinterest, as a sign that the connection is not mutual. But what if it is none of those things? What if the runner is not pulling away from you, but from the energy you are in? This is where everything begins to shift. Because the runner does not respond to your intentions. They respond to your energy. And energy that comes from wanting carries pressure, even if you do not express it outwardly. even if you are not reaching out, even if you are trying to stay calm. If your internal state is rooted in wanting, needing, or expecting something to happen, that energy is felt. And pressure does not create closeness. It creates distance. Think about it in a simple way. When someone is trying to get something from you, when their attention feels focused on you in a way that expects something in return, you feel it. Even if they don't say anything, even if they act neutral, there is a subtle tension, a sense that something is being directed toward you. And your natural response is to create space. Not because you don't care, but because you need to restore balance. And this is exactly what happens in the twin flame dynamic. The more your energy reaches toward them, the more they feel that pull. And the more they feel that pull, the more they instinctively move away. Not as a conscious decision, not as something they plan, but as a natural energetic response. Because imbalance creates movement. And movement in this case means distance. This is why the runner's behavior can feel so confusing. Because from your perspective, you are feeling connection. You are feeling closeness. You are feeling something meaningful. But from their perspective, they are feeling pressure. Not because you are doing something wrong, but because your energy is not yet stable. It is reaching. It is focused on them. It is carrying an unspoken expectation that something should happen. And that expectation creates tension, even if it is subtle, even if it is not fully conscious. And tension cannot sustain connection. It pushes it away. This is why wanting creates the opposite effect. The more you want, the more your energy moves outward. The more your energy moves outward, the more the other person feels it. And the more they feel it, the more they create distance. And this is the cycle. Not because the connection is not real, but because the energy is not balanced. But here is where everything begins to change. The moment you stop wanting, the moment your energy returns to you, the moment you are no longer reaching, everything shifts. Not externally at first, but internally. You feel calmer, less reactive, less focused on what they are doing or not doing. Your attention returns to your life, to your experience, to yourself. And in that return, the pressure disappears, because you are no longer directing energy toward them. You are grounded, centered, present. And when that happens, the dynamic changes. The runner no longer feels the need to create distance, because there is no longer anything to move away from. There is no pressure, no expectation, no imbalance. And without those things, the connection becomes safe. Not safe in the sense of comfort, but safe in the sense of balance. A space where both individuals can exist without reacting, without needing to move away, without needing to protect themselves from the intensity. And this is where the paradox becomes clear. The moment you stop trying to bring them closer is the moment they begin to come closer. Not because you did something to attract them, but because you stopped creating the condition that pushed them away. And this is the truth that most people never realize. The runner is not running from you. They are responding to the energy of wanting, to the pressure of expectation, to the imbalance that exists when one side is reaching. And when that energy disappears, there is nothing left to run from, only something to move toward. Naturally, without force, without effort. And this is why the shift is internal. Because you cannot control what the other person does. You cannot force them to come closer. You cannot make them understand the connection. But you can change your energy. You can stop reaching. You can return to yourself. You can become stable. And that stability is what changes everything. Not because it guarantees an outcome, but because it removes the resistance. It removes the tension. It removes the need for the other person to create distance. And in that absence, the connection is free. Free to move. Free to align. Free to come together. Without being influenced by imbalance. So if you find yourself questioning why they pull away, why they create distance, why the connection feels like it moves in cycles. Do not look at what they are doing. Look at the energy. Look at where your attention is. Look at whether you are reaching or being. Because the answer is not in their behavior. It is in the dynamic. And the dynamic is shaped by energy. And the moment your energy changes, the dynamic changes with it. Not instantly. Not always in a way you can see right away. But inevitably. Because once the pressure is gone, there is nothing left to push them away. And that is when everything begins to shift. Not because you made it happen, but because you stopped creating the condition that kept it from happening. And that is the truth. The runner was never the problem. The distance was never random. It was always a response. And the moment the energy changes, so does everything else. Chapter 5. The shift when you stop wanting without trying. There is a moment in this journey that does not come from effort. You don't decide it. You don't plan it. You don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to stop wanting. And yet it happens. Quietly, naturally, almost without you noticing. The intensity fades. The constant thinking softens. The urgency disappears. And suddenly, you are no longer wanting in the same way. Not because you forced yourself to let go, but because the need itself is gone. This is one of the most important shifts in the entire journey. And it is also one of the most misunderstood. Because from the outside, it can look like you are giving up. You are no longer chasing. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer emotionally attached in the same way. So the mind begins to question it. Why don't I feel the same urgency anymore? Why does it feel like I don't need this? Am I losing the connection? But look deeper. Are you really losing the connection? Or are you finally losing the attachment? Because there is a difference. Attachment is what creates wanting. It is the belief that something outside of you is needed in order for you to feel complete. It is the feeling that something has to happen. That something has to change. That something is missing until it does. And that belief creates movement. It keeps your attention focused on the future. On what is not here. On what you are trying to reach. But at some point that belief begins to dissolve. Not because you rejected it. Not because you tried to change it. But because you outgrew it. You no longer feel the same lack. You no longer feel like something is missing. You no longer feel the need to make something happen. And in that absence of need, wanting disappears. Naturally. Effortlessly. Without resistance. And this is where the shift becomes real. Because for the first time, your energy is no longer extended outward. You are not reaching. You are not chasing. You are not trying to close a gap. You are simply here. Fully present in your own experience. And that presence changes everything. Because when you are present, you are not projecting yourself into the future. You are not focusing on what is not here. You are grounded in what is. And that grounding removes tension. It removes the subtle pressure that wanting creates. It removes the energy that was pushing the connection away. And in that absence, something new begins to emerge. Ease. A sense that nothing needs to be forced. That nothing needs to be controlled. That everything can unfold on its own. And this is what most people miss. Because they think letting go is something you do. Something you try. Something you force yourself into. But real letting go does not come from effort. It comes from realization. From seeing clearly that there is nothing to hold on to. That there is nothing to control. That there is nothing missing. And when that realization becomes real, letting go happens on its own. You stop wanting without trying to. You stop chasing without deciding to. You stop focusing on the connection without forcing yourself away from it. Because your energy has shifted. You are no longer operating from lack. You are operating from wholeness. And wholeness does not create wanting. It creates presence. And presence is what allows everything to align. Because when you are present, you are not interfering. You are not adding pressure. You are not projecting expectation. You are allowing. And that allowance is what creates flow. The kind of flow that does not need to be forced. The kind of flow that naturally brings things together. Because nothing is standing in the way. And this is the paradox that defines this stage. The moment you stop wanting is the moment everything begins to move. Not because you made it happen, but because you stopped holding it back. Because wanting was never bringing the connection closer. It was creating resistance. And when that resistance disappears, there is nothing left to keep the connection apart. And this is why this shift feels so different. Because it is not dramatic. It is not intense. It does not feel like something powerful is happening. It feels simple, calm, almost ordinary. And that is what makes it real. Because real alignment does not feel intense. It feels stable. It feels like nothing needs to happen. Because everything is already in place. And from that place, everything begins to unfold. Not through effort, not through action, but through alignment. So if you find yourself no longer wanting, if you notice that the urgency is gone, if you feel calm where there was once intensity, do not question it. Do not try to bring back the old feeling. Do not think that you are losing something. Recognize what is actually happening. You are no longer in a state of lack. You are no longer creating resistance. You are aligned. And alignment is what allows union to happen. Not wanting. Not chasing. Not trying. But simply being. And that is the shift. Not something you do, but something you become. A state where nothing is missing. A state where nothing needs to be forced. A state where everything can finally come together. Because you are no longer standing in its way. Chapter 6. You return to yourself the moment your energy comes back home. There is a moment in this journey that feels almost ordinary. No dramatic realization. No sudden breakthrough. No external sign that something has shifted. And yet everything has. Because your energy is no longer where it used to be. For so long, your attention lived outside of you. It was directed toward them. Toward the connection. Toward what could happen or what wasn't happening yet. Even when you were going through your day, part of you was always somewhere else. Thinking, wondering, waiting. Your mind was occupied. Your energy was extended. Your sense of presence was divided. And because of that, something felt incomplete. Not because your life was lacking, but because your attention was not fully here. You were living your life, but you were not fully in it. And this is what creates the feeling of imbalance. Not the absence of the other person, but the absence of your full presence within yourself. But then something changes. Not because you tried to change it. Not because you forced yourself to focus on something else. But because the need to stay connected in that way begins to fade. You are no longer constantly thinking about them. You are no longer analyzing everything. You are no longer checking for signs or meaning. And without realizing it, your attention returns. Back to you. Back to your life. Back to what is actually in front of you. And this is the moment your energy comes home. At first, it can feel unfamiliar. Even strange. Because you have spent so much time living in a state of divided attention. So when your energy returns fully to you, there is a sense of quiet. A sense of space. A feeling that something has shifted even if you cannot explain it. You might notice that you are more present in simple things. Your thoughts are not constantly drifting. Your emotions are more stable. Your focus is no longer pulled in multiple directions. And this presence feels different. Not intense. Not overwhelming. But grounded. Real. And this is where the deeper shift begins. Because when your energy returns to you, you become whole. Not in the sense that something was missing before, but in the sense that you are no longer divided. You are no longer extending yourself outward in search of something. You are here. Fully. And that changes everything. Because earlier, your experience of the connection was shaped by that extension. You were reaching. Seeking. Trying to understand. Trying to get closer. And that reaching created tension. It created movement. It kept you in a state of wanting. But now there is no reaching. There is no seeking. There is no need to go anywhere. Because you are already here. And in that presence, something important becomes clear. You are not missing anything. Not in your life. Not in yourself. Not in this moment. And when you realize that, the entire dynamic shifts. Because the feeling of wanting was rooted in the belief that something was missing. That something outside of you was needed in order for you to feel complete. But now, you don't feel that way. You feel full. Not because something was added, but because nothing is being projected outward anymore. Your energy is no longer divided. It is integrated. And this integration creates stability. A kind of stability that does not depend on anything external. A kind of presence that does not need to be maintained. It simply exists. And this is where alignment begins. Because alignment is not something you create. It is something that happens when your energy is fully with you. When you are no longer extending yourself outward. When you are no longer trying to reach something outside of your current experience. And this is the state you are entering. A state where your life becomes real again. Not something you are moving through while thinking about something else. But something you are fully experiencing. You begin to notice things you didn't notice before. You feel more connected to your own path. Your own direction. Your own sense of purpose. And that connection to yourself replaces the need to focus on the other person. Not because you stop caring, but because you are no longer dependent. And that is the shift. From dependency to wholeness. From seeking to being. From extending to returning. And this return is what changes everything. Because when your energy is fully with you, there is no pressure. No expectation. No need for something to happen. You are not trying to make the connection move. You are not trying to understand it. You are not trying to control the outcome. You are simply living your life. And in that state, the connection is no longer being influenced by imbalance. It is no longer reacting to your energy. It is no longer being shaped by your attention. It is free. Free to exist. Free to evolve. Free to come together. Without interference. And this is why this stage is so important. Because it is not about what you do. It is about where you are. Where your energy lives. Where your attention rests. And when both of those are fully with you, everything aligns. Not because you made it happen, but because you stopped creating the conditions that kept it from happening. And this is the paradox. The moment you return to yourself is the moment the connection becomes possible. Not because you focused on it, but because you stopped needing to. So if you find yourself more present, more grounded, less focused on the connection, do not think that you are moving away from it. Recognize what is actually happening. You're coming back to yourself. And that return is what makes everything else possible. Because the connection was never meant to take you away from your life. It was meant to bring you back to it. To a place where you are fully here. Fully present. Fully whole. And from that place, everything begins to unfold. Naturally. Effortlessly. Without force. Because your energy is no longer divided. It is home. And when your energy is home, there is nothing left to search for. Only something to experience. And that is where everything begins. Chapter 7. The paradox letting go is what pulls them closer. There is a moment in this journey that feels almost contradictory. Everything you thought would bring you closer no longer feels right. And everything you thought would push them away suddenly feels like the answer. You stop chasing. You stop focusing on them. You stop trying to make something happen. And instead of the connection fading, something shifts. Subtly at first. Almost unnoticeably. But undeniably. They feel closer. The energy feels different. The distance no longer feels the same. And this is where the paradox begins to reveal itself. Because it goes against everything you believed. You thought that wanting them would bring them closer. You thought that thinking about them would strengthen the connection. You thought that holding on to the idea of union would help it happen. But now you see something different. The more you let go, the more everything aligns. And this can feel confusing, because it does not follow logic. It does not match what you were taught about love. You were taught that effort creates results, that caring deeply means holding on, that if something matters, you should fight for it. But this connection does not respond to effort in the same way. It responds to energy. And energy does not move toward effort. It moves toward balance. This is why letting go changes everything. Because letting go is not about losing something. It is about removing imbalance. Earlier in the journey, your energy was extended. You were reaching, focused on them, focused on what was happening or not happening. And that reaching created pressure, even if it was subtle, even if it was not intentional. It existed. And that pressure created distance. But when you let go, when you stop reaching, when your energy returns to you, the pressure disappears. And when the pressure disappears, there is nothing left to push them away. This is the key. It is not that letting go pulls them closer. It is that letting go removes what was keeping them away. And that difference is everything. Because it means you are not creating attraction. You are allowing it. You are not doing something to make the connection happen. You are stopping what was preventing it from happening. And this is why it feels so effortless. Because it is. You are no longer trying. You are no longer controlling. You are no longer influencing the outcome. You are simply allowing things to be. And in that allowance, everything begins to move. Naturally. Without force. Without effort. And this is where the paradox becomes clear. The more you try to hold on to something, the more it resists. The moment you release it, it becomes free. And freedom is what allows connection to exist. Not attachment. Not control. Not expectation. Freedom. Because freedom removes pressure. It removes the need for something to be a certain way. It removes the subtle demand that something should happen. And without that demand, the connection can finally breathe. It can exist without reacting, without needing to create distance, without needing to protect itself from imbalance. And this is what allows it to come closer. Not because you pulled it in, but because you stopped pushing it away. And this is where the shift becomes undeniable. You are no longer focused on the connection. You are no longer trying to understand it. You are no longer waiting for something to change. You are living your life. Present. Grounded. Whole. And from that place, the connection feels different. Not intense. Not overwhelming. But steady. Subtle. Real. And that reality is what creates alignment. Because alignment is not something you force. It is something that emerges when everything is in balance. And balance only exists when there is no reaching, no chasing, no wanting, only presence. And presence is what allows everything to come together. So if you find yourself letting go, if you notice that you are no longer attached in the same way, if you feel calm where there was once intensity, do not question it. Do not think that you are losing something. Recognize what is actually happening. You are removing resistance. You are restoring balance. You are allowing the connection to exist without pressure. And that is what changes everything. Because the moment there is no pressure, there is no reason for distance. And the moment there is no distance, everything begins to align. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but naturally, as if it was always meant to. Because it was. It was never about doing more, trying harder, wanting stronger. It was always about letting go. Not as a strategy, but as a state where you are no longer reaching, where you are no longer trying to control what happens next, where you are fully here, fully present, fully in your own energy. And from that place, everything else follows. Without effort, without force, without resistance, because you are no longer standing in the way. And that is the paradox. The moment you stop trying to bring them closer is the moment they can finally come closer. Not because you changed them, but because you changed your energy. And when your energy changes, everything changes with it. And that is the truth. Union does not happen when you hold on. It happens when you let go. Not because you gave up, but because you finally stopped interfering. And in that space, everything can finally come together. Chapter 8. Union begins within before anything happens outside. There is a moment in this journey that changes everything, but it does not look the way you expect. No message arrives. No reunion takes place. No visible shift happens in the physical world. And yet something has already begun. This is where most people miss the truth. Because they are waiting for union to appear externally. They expect it to show up as a moment. A conversation. A clear event that confirms everything is finally coming together. But union does not begin there. It begins within you. And that internal beginning is so subtle, so quiet, that it is often overlooked. Because nothing outside has changed. You may still not be in contact. You may still not know what will happen next. You may still not have any clear answers. And yet you feel different. You are calmer. Less reactive. Less focused on what they are doing or not doing. You are no longer waiting in the same way. And because there is no external confirmation, your mind questions it. Is this really progress? Why does it feel like nothing is happening? If union is close, shouldn't something be changing? But this is where the deeper truth becomes clear. What you are experiencing is not the absence of movement. It is the presence of alignment. And alignment always happens internally first. Because the external world does not lead the connection. It reflects it. It mirrors the state you are already in. So if your internal state is unstable, reactive, or attached, the external dynamic will reflect that. It will show up as distance, inconsistency, or confusion. But when your internal state becomes stable, when you are no longer reacting, when you are no longer chasing, when you are no longer needing something to happen, the external dynamic begins to shift. Not immediately. Not in a way that is always visible right away. But inevitably. Because once the internal alignment is there is nothing left preventing the external expression. This is why union begins within. Because the connection cannot stabilize externally until it is stable internally. It cannot come together in the physical world if the energy behind it is still imbalanced. An imbalance comes from wanting, from attachment, from the belief that something needs to change in order for you to feel complete. But when those things dissolve, when you no longer feel that need, when you are grounded, present, and whole, the energy becomes stable. And stable energy does not create resistance. It does not push. It does not pull. It simply exists. And that existence is what allows union to form. Not through effort. Not through action. But through alignment. And this is where the misunderstanding begins to dissolve. Because you realize that union is not something that suddenly appears. It is something that gradually becomes. A state that you step into. A shift in how you experience yourself and the connection. And once you are in that state, everything else follows. Naturally. Without force. Without needing to make something happen. Think about it. What did you believe union would feel like? Peace. Stability. Clarity. A sense that everything is finally okay. Now look at how you feel. You are calm. You are not chasing. You are not waiting in the same way. You are focused on your life. You feel whole. So ask yourself this. If you already feel what you thought union would bring, what are you still waiting for? This is the moment where everything shifts. Because you realize that union is not ahead of you. It is already happening within you. Not as a visible event, but as a state of being. And that state is what creates everything else. Because once you are aligned internally, the external world has no choice but to reflect it. Not immediately. Not always in a way you can predict. But inevitably. because there is nothing left to resist it, nothing left to block it, nothing left to keep it from forming. And this is why this stage feels so quiet, because there is no more tension, no more imbalance, no more need to create movement. Everything has already settled. And from that stillness, everything begins to unfold. So if you find yourself in a place where nothing seems to be happening, where everything feels calm, where the connection is no longer intense, do not assume that you are far from union. Recognize what is actually happening. You are no longer trying to reach it. You are already in it. Not externally. Not yet in a way that can be seen. But internally. And that is where it begins. Always. Because the external world does not create union. It reveals it. And once it is established within you, there is nothing left to create. Only something to express. Naturally. Effortlessly. Without resistance. Because you are no longer waiting for union to happen. You are already becoming it. And from that place, everything else will follow. In its own time. In its own way. Without force. Because the most important part has already happened. Within you. Chapter 9. The moment it happens when you no longer care if it does. There is a moment in this journey that feels almost impossible to recognize when it arrives. Not because it is hidden, but because it looks nothing like what you expected. No sudden message. No dramatic reunion. No clear sign that something has finally changed. Instead, something inside you becomes still. You notice that you are no longer waiting. You are no longer checking. You are no longer asking when it will happen. And more importantly, you are okay if it doesn't. At first, this can feel confusing. Because for so long, everything within you may have been oriented toward union. You believed it was the destination. The point where everything would finally make sense. The moment where the connection would become real in a way that could not be questioned. So the idea of not caring anymore can feel like something is wrong. Why don't I feel the same urgency? Why does it not matter the way it used to? Am I losing the connection? But this is where the truth begins to reveal itself. You are not losing the connection. You are losing the need for it. And that is the moment everything changes. Because needing something creates tension. It creates a subtle pressure. A sense that something has to happen in order for you to feel complete. And that pressure is what keeps the connection from stabilizing. But when the need disappears, the pressure disappears with it. You are no longer trying to make something happen. You are no longer holding onto a specific outcome. You are no longer depending on the connection for your sense of fulfillment. You are simply living. Fully. Presently. Without needing anything to be different. And in that state, something shifts. Not in a way you can see immediately, but in a way you can feel. The energy becomes lighter. The connection feels different. Not intense. Not overwhelming. But steady. Calm. Real. And this is the moment where union begins to take form. Not because you wanted it, but because you no longer need it. This is the paradox. The moment you stop caring whether it happens is the moment it can finally happen. Not because you gave up, but because you removed the only thing that was holding it back. Your attachment. Your expectation. Your need for a specific outcome. Think about it. Earlier in the journey, your energy was focused on the future. On what could happen. On what you were trying to reach. You were constantly referencing something that was not here yet. And that created a gap. A distance between where you were and where you believed you needed to be. And that gap is what defines separation. But now there is no gap. You are not projecting yourself into the future. You are not waiting for something to arrive. You are here. Fully present in your own life. And from that place, there is nothing missing. Nothing that needs to happen. Nothing that needs to change. And when nothing is missing, there is no resistance. And when there is no resistance, everything can align. Naturally. Without force. Without effort. This is why this moment feels so quiet. Because there is no movement, no urgency, no sense that something is about to happen. Only stillness. And in that stillness, everything is already in place. You are no longer chasing. You are no longer trying to understand. You are no longer asking questions. You are simply being. And being is what allows everything to unfold. Because you are not interfering. You are not creating pressure. You are not projecting expectation. You are allowing. And that allowance creates space. Space for the connection to evolve. Space for things to come together. Space for union to take form. Not as something you created, but as something that naturally emerges. Because there is nothing left preventing it. This is why this moment is so powerful. Because it is not something you can force. It is not something you can decide. It happens when everything has aligned. When the wanting is gone. When the attachment is gone. When the need is gone. And all that remains is presence. And presence is what defines union. Not the external event. Not the physical reunion. But the internal state. A state where you are no longer dependent on anything outside of you. A state where you are stable, whole, complete. And from that state, everything else follows. Not immediately. Not always in a way you can predict. But inevitably. Because once the internal alignment is there, the external world has no choice but to reflect it. So if you find yourself in a place where you no longer care whether it happens, where you are okay with whatever unfolds, where you are no longer waiting, do not question it. Do not think that you are losing something. Recognize what is actually happening. You have reached the point where there is nothing left to hold on to. Nothing left to chase. Nothing left to control. And in that release, everything begins to come together. Not because you made it happen, but because you stopped standing in its way. And that is the truth. Union does not happen when you want it the most. It happens when you no longer need it at all. Because that is the moment where everything is aligned. And when everything is aligned, there is nothing left to do. Only something to allow. And from that place, everything unfolds. Quietly. Naturally. Without effort. Because the moment you stop caring whether it happens, is the moment it already has. Within you. Chapter 10. The final truth: you didn't lose desire, you found freedom. There is a moment in this journey where something feels unfamiliar. Not because something is wrong, but because something fundamental has changed. You notice that you don't want the connection the way you used to. The urgency is gone. The intensity has softened. The constant pull is no longer there. And in that space a question arises. Why don't I want it the same way anymore? At first, this can feel unsettling. Because you have been taught that desire equals love. That wanting something strongly means it matters. That if the intensity fades, something must be lost. So when that desire changes, it can feel like you are losing the connection. Like something important is slipping away. But this is where the final truth begins to reveal itself. You did not lose desire. You lost dependence. And that is what creates freedom. Because earlier in the journey, your desire was not just about connection. It was about completion. You wanted them because you felt something was missing. You wanted the connection to move forward because you believed it would bring you peace. You wanted union because you thought it would make everything make sense. And that kind of desire carries weight. It carries expectation. It carries a subtle need for something to happen. And that need creates tension. It creates pressure. It keeps your energy focused on what is not here. But now that weight is gone. You can think about them without feeling pulled. You can imagine the connection without needing it to happen. You can feel something without needing to act on it. And that experience is very different. Because it is not driven by lack. It is not driven by need. It is driven by presence. And presence does not create urgency. It creates freedom. Freedom to feel without attachment. Freedom to experience without needing an outcome. freedom to allow things to be exactly as they are. And this is where the shift becomes undeniable. Because you are no longer trying to get something from the connection. You are no longer trying to complete something within yourself. You are simply open. Open to whatever unfolds. Without needing it to be a certain way. And that openness changes everything. Because when you are open, you are not creating resistance. You are not holding on to a specific outcome. You are not projecting expectation into the future. You are allowing. And that allowance is what creates flow. The kind of flow that does not need effort. The kind of flow that does not need to be forced. The kind of flow that simply moves because nothing is blocking it. And this is what most people misunderstand. They think that letting go means losing interest. That not wanting something means it no longer matters. But in reality, it means it no longer controls you. You still feel something. You still recognize the connection. You still understand its significance. But it does not define your state. It does not determine your happiness. It does not shape your sense of self. And that is freedom. Not the absence of feeling, but the absence of dependency. And this is what allows union to happen. Not because you want it, but because you no longer need it. Because needing something creates pressure. It creates the sense that something has to happen. That something has to change. That something is missing until it does. And that pressure is what keeps the connection from stabilizing. But when that pressure disappears, there is nothing left to push it away. Nothing left to create distance. Nothing left to interfere with its natural flow. And from that place, everything begins to align. Not because you made it happen, but because you stopped holding it back. And this is the final realization. Union was never about getting something. It was about becoming someone. Someone who is no longer driven by lack. Someone who is no longer dependent on external outcomes. Someone who is stable, present, and whole. And now you are. Not because something changed outside of you, but because everything has shifted within you. You are no longer chasing. No longer waiting. No longer trying to control what happens next. You are living. Fully. Presently. Without needing anything to be different. And from that place, everything else unfolds. Naturally. Effortlessly. Without resistance. Because you are no longer standing in the way. You are no longer creating the conditions that kept the connection unstable. You are allowing it to exist as it is. And that is what makes it real. Not the intensity. Not the desire. Not the constant emotional experience. But the stability. The presence. The quiet knowing that does not need to be proven. And this is where everything comes together. Not in a moment. Not in an event. But in a state. A state where you are no longer seeking. No longer needing. No longer waiting. Only being. And that is where union lives. Not in what you want, but in what you have become. So if you find yourself no longer wanting the connection the way you used to, if you feel calm where there was once urgency, if you feel free where there was once attachment, do not question it. Do not try to bring back the old feeling. Do not think that you are losing something. Recognize what is actually happening. You are not losing desire. You are finding freedom. And that freedom is what allows everything else to align. Because the moment you are free is the moment you are no longer creating resistance. And when there is no resistance, there is nothing left to keep union from happening. So the next time you notice that you don't want it the same way anymore, pause and ask yourself, did you lose the connection? Or did you finally find yourself? Because the answer will change everything. And once you see it, you will understand. Union was never about wanting. It was always about becoming. And now, you are.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.